Okay, welcome back to Developer's Diary 4, version 4.2. This is part 3, where we talk about technology. So, the first technology change that I thought was really big is radar. You've made a number of changes to radar. I mean, it's completely reworked. It's not just tweaked. So, for example, one thing that you did was lower the defensive value of radar for convoy rating from a 2 down to a 1. But surprisingly or shockingly to me, you then increased the value of radar in the attacking a convoy line. It's had an impact in I don't know if that changed with the Battlecruiser, but it just seems like radar is now an aggressive thing as well as a defensive thing. Is this correct? Or you're maybe I've got this wrong about radar. Maybe you haven't reworked radar that much.
We did rework it, and the main reason was actually mid game. We tended to see that the convoy would stop because typically Great Britain would have ASW and radar, so they would now have a plus one to the German submarines, and the balance for the aircraft on that would be totally screwed because they were at +3 versus the aircraft, which has +1. So we tended to see that convoying would die out mid game, so we wanted to address this, and this is the answer. So now Great Britain only gets +1. So if they get the 2 techs and Germany does nothing, they're equal. But now Germany is actually able to also up the stakes for going after radar, because now they can switch things. So now Great Britain has to go for long range aircraft to level the playing field again. So now we see mid game convoying is still something that is viable.
Yeah,
And you can also say that overall for tech, our objective has been to increase the number of tier 1 and tier 2 techs for everyone. And I think we were quite successful in doing that because of the new changes. We have several techs that has been more important to players, but they would already have a full plate of good techs. So now they just have more dilemmas. What do you go for? Which is what we want.
It's so
Yeah.
torturesome because, for example, Germany, I don't think radar was a tier 1 tech, but now you might decide to go for advanced subs plus radar and really just convoy raid, your way to victory. So you made that for the Germans go up, but then by lowering it from a 2 to a 1 before, I believe for the Commonwealth, radar was the most important tech for Great Britain to get in version 4.1 and earlier, and now you've made ASW and long-range aircraft more enticing. So you knocked it down a little bit for one country and raised it up for another country. That's a pretty neat trick to do. So I can see how you're trying to make the decisions about what techs each country should roll for even more of a torment. So you're making people suffer, which is I know that makes you happy. So okay, let's talk about another.
And now radar. Yeah.
Please.
And and now radar is +1 across the board.
Easy.
So it's
for
now
people
easy
to remember.
So it's no longer, is it +2 here? Does it give anything here? It's just +1 across the board. So
Yeah.
we balanced, we tweaked the balance. We added the strategic dilemmas, and we simplified the rules. So it's three times a win.
Yeah, that is
for us.
pretty impressive. Okay, so another tech that needed some love was Airborne Doctrine. I don't think that anyone was saying that was a tier 1 tech before. So one of the things is that airborne infantry don't have to suffer the inherent AA from cities. The city's inherent AA if you have airborne doctrine. And then enemy fortifications first strikes can't hit target airborne assaulting airborne infantry. Is that with a new one with just airborne doctrine? How did the fortifications change come into it? The first strikes, is that so you can drop airborne? If you have airborne doctrine, then you can hit empty fortifications. Is that the idea of that particular change, or do I have that rule
Yes,
incorrect?
we wanted to give, like you say, Airborne Doctrine a bit more love. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not a tier 1 tech. We don't need it to be tier 1 tech, but we want it to be more useful for players. And you can argue that, well, historically, cities were not attacked with airborne at all anyway. So we could also remove the option entirely, but that won't give us what we want. So we opted for um, this inherent AA capability of cities if you don't have the tech.
What I like is that in the early part of the game, before anyone has airborne doctrine or long range aircraft, the inherent AA of cities is going to be kind of a protection when you don't have much money and things are really tight. It's going to be hard for Germany to just fly airborne into London and drop off there. But then in the late game, when you have long range aircraft, maybe you have some heavy strategic or have a strategic bomber with a long range. Then, if you develop airborne doctrine, you could drop something 9 spaces away. So I kind of like that you can do Operation Market Garden craziness in the late game, but you can't do that in the early game. I think that works out well for that particular tech. Long range aircraft, you made a change to. Now, long range aircraft gives you a +1 to your convoy defense. And what that does is when you think about the Commonwealth, you can roll for 2 techs. That's your default number of tech rolls with Commonwealth. You could go for ASW and long range aircraft. If you got those 2 techs, your seaplanes are now just amazing. They have a range of 3 from a seaplane base, and they have an attack of 5 against submarines. Um, Talk about a unit that wasn't getting very much love a couple versions ago. Now seaplanes, I had one built this game. Hambone Lend-Leased it to me. Seaplanes are pretty useful items now, and you made long-range aircraft maybe something for the Commonwealth to consider as a tier 1 tech. Of course, it's just a great tech. Any comments about making that +1 to the defense for long-range aircraft?
Well, it's like we talked about for the radar. It's a way of tweaking and balancing. Uh, so that's why we added that in. Uh, so we took something away from Commonwealth and we gave them something. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's
Yeah, but you spread it out because before you only had to get 2 techs to get a +3 to your defense, and now you have to get 3 techs. So it increases the time where subs are useful, because before all
correct.
so that was a good change to the game. And just as a side note, making convoy rating better. We'll talk about battlecruisers a little bit later, but making convoy rating better is an interesting way to help the common turn, because if the Axis are putting more money into subs or battlecruisers or planes on map, that's not coming after the Soviets, and it's taxing the Allies. So it's that change to make convoy rating better diminishes. It puts weight on the Allies, and it taxes the Axis. So in a way, it's helping the common turn. You know.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, correct. And
okay, so
we spent more than 5 years uh, tweaking and balancing this convoy rating concept. And it's actually you would think that it's not a core element in the
but it
game,
is.
but
Yeah.
but it is. exactly, because what you just say is that it affects the balance between Russia and Germany as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it is crucial to get it right,
Yeah.
and by getting it right, we need to get it right early game. We need to get it right mid game. Possibly, if in the perfect scenario, it's also should also be right late game, but it definitely should be early to mid game. That
Mm-hmm.
needs to work, and it needs to work for everyone across the board. But it also it must not also be too powerful. So
Exactly. Right. That's a
it's
tricky
a very
balance.
very yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, but now, I mean, in the current version, I think it's been it is the best we've had so far.
Mm-hmm.
So I really like it.
I do too. I think the convoy ratings. Before I remember when you said make strategic bombing great again. I think that was version 4.0 that you said that. Now I feel like convoy rating is great. It's more into the middle game, whereas before it was working just fine in the early game, but then it just died off and it wasn't worth it. But now I think
Yeah,
it's got legs. So there's one
and you can
interesting.
also argue, yeah, you can
Yeah.
also actually also argue that, let's say that you invest in submarines uh, with Germany, and that will give you the ability to play this convoy game. But with the rules, with the new rules for supply path, you're actually able to use your submarines for something else as well,
Yes.
and that also really helps the if you look at the business case for submarines,
Mm-hmm.
because they can also now do other stuff that is of crucial importance.
Yes.
And we've seen where this introduction of supply path actually changed everything, because suddenly that medium armor didn't get built, or suddenly that fighter didn't make it or something. So it really helps motivate the the, the desire to build submarines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
they're more. They have more utility. Well, one of the
yeah,
things that I know you love it when a game mechanic works the same in multiple different roles, and that's one of the things that you did with submarines and interdiction. It used to be before version 4.2, the sending player would roll a d6, and the attacking, the interdicting player would roll a d6, and we'd see who rolled the higher roll. But now, the way it works, if you try to pass something through a sea zone that has a submarine, then the submarine gets a chance to interdict on a 1, 2, or 3. Um, if it's a advanced sub, you get to double your submarine's roll. Is that correct? It goes from 4 to an 8, but doesn't advanced subs also help even normal subs go from 3 to 6 for interdiction? Or do I have that wrong? I'm putting you on the spot. How well do you know the rules, my friend?
well, it's double for all
It's double.
submarines.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for all submarines.
um, yeah,
Yeah, that's awesome. So that makes the it makes it easier for new players to understand. Oh, subs attack on a 3, so if I'm interdicting, I get to roll and see if I get a 3 or not. But it
yeah,
also increases the tension and the like. Having it be 50-50 might make me less likely to send it. Having it be 25%, maybe I do try to get that medium armor through,
yeah,
So it makes the tension
yeah,
go up, because otherwise I just wouldn't do it. You know what I mean? I probably
exactly.
wouldn't
Yeah,
send it. This way, I'm enticed to take the risk. So I thought that was a good change too.
and this is actually exactly what happened, because previously when it was 50-50, we would typically see no, I don't want to risk it.
Right?
So we wanted to open the door a bit. Let's risk it. Let's try it out.
Yep.
I'm willing to risk it. It's only a 3 or it's only a whatever.
Right.
Uh,
Delicious.
so yeah,
Evil.
yeah,
Okay. Heavy fleet carriers can now carry a medium bomber, but the medium bomber takes up 2 slots on the heavy fleet carrier. So it's a Doolittle raid. You can fly
yeah,
a
yeah.
medium bomber. Yeah. So
Some
that
guy, some guy named Doodle did something crazy. Um,
it was crazy. That's
yeah,
awesome.
and so it was. It's not something that will be used often.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but it can be quite interesting because that bomber can damage airbase or something,
Yes. So then it can't
which
scramble.
then yeah. So
Right.
yeah, um, and you can say that heavy sea carriers are quite expensive to develop and build.
Hmm.
So another flavor for them would not hurt anyone. So
Right. Might buff them a little bit, get them more likely to get in the game because you only need one medium bomber a lot of times to do amazing
yeah,
things. So,
yeah,
um, improved logistics now provides a +1 to strategic naval movement. So just going over strategic naval movement, if you're doing a strategic naval move from a minor naval facility, then uh, in the earlier versions of the rules, you could do strategic naval move from a minor port to a minor port, and you could move a naval transport, carry something 5 spaces. But now you can only do that range of 5 from a major naval facility. This is not involving this tech. This is just how it works. But if you're doing strategic naval movement with a naval transport from a minor facility, then you can add +1 and you can go a range of 3. So I like that because again it comes back to the similar themes where the major naval facilities 5, the minor naval facilities 3. Sometimes with a naval transport you do need to get it one more space, so you could use strategic naval movement. And now with improved logistics you get a +1 to the naval movement range. So I really like that. Any comments about that particular change?
it's like you said. It's a way of sometimes you do need the extra range,
Hmm.
but also it's a way of integrating. Excuse me. It's a way of integrating of this supply path and tech, integrate them into cohesion.
Hmm.
So and we've also we if you recall we changed improved statistics since we introduced it. Um, when we initially had it, it was a bit too powerful,
Double.
so we toned it down double, yeah. And now we are trying to integrate more with the new supply stuff as well to make it more interesting for more nations to develop.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Well, the final technology change is the Hambone rule. My good friend Hambone is cursed when it comes to strategic bombing. I think one game he went on 5 strategic bombing missions and got shot down 4 times. He is just a magnet for AA flag. But with heavy strategic bombers now, enemy facilities' inherent anti-aircraft artillery defends at a 1 instead of a 3. This is going to make it very appealing to get a heavy strategic bomber, or to get heavy strategic bombing, the tech, because that would apply even if I flew a medium bomber. I don't. It's not just the heavy strategic bombers. It's once you have that tech, the inherent AA drops down to just a 1. That's phenomenal. That's very tempting. Hambone is rolling for that tech. He's not succeeding, but he is trying to get that tech. Any comments about that?
Well, to all the ham bones in the world, this one is for you.
Yeah.
Um, so it was a big risk previously.
Mm-hmm.
Bombers are expensive, and getting shut down is just yeah,
Painful. Yeah.
painful. So you can argue, well, if you look at the history, nighttime bombing was introduced, higher altitudes. So yeah, um,
It makes
and
sense
it's
historically.
yeah, and it's so it makes sense, and it's also expensive tech to get. So you do need to commit
Hmm.
to it. So again, now I think that that tech is more viable for more nations
Hmm.
because of the fact that you're also improving your already existing medium bombers and perhaps even strategic bombers. Um, and that is actually also why when we introduce tech, we sometimes give the existing units upgraded capabilities because if it was only the new units that got the improved capabilities, then the old units would be made redundant or something. So that is also a way of uh, balancing things out a bit.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that heavy strategic bombers was a tier one tech for America and Russia because it's the path to getting a victory point. But for the other countries, maybe it wasn't very useful. But now it can definitely be a tier two, move from a tier three to a tier two tech because of that thing that you don't even have to build the bombers. All the bombers that are on the board will have that benefit. And sometimes at the end of the game, there's a key place that you really need to take that airbase out and eliminate their supply or whatever. And it's really painful to lose that bomber to the 1, 2, or 3. So I love this change. This I know Hambones. This is the thing he's most excited about. So I'm passing along his thanks. Let's talk now. We talked about just some rules changes in general. One very important rule change is that if Berlin is captured, the Germans no longer surrender. This is a game altering change because just the fact that taking Berlin as the Russians, if you took Berlin, you would make the German units be removed from the board. That would open up Paris, and so in a way, you were disincentivized to take Berlin as the Russians. You might give the Allies more victory points than you're gaining. So comments about this important rule change.
it's like you said, the Comintern player doesn't want to give the allies 3 victory points for Paris. Um, so that's why we changed it. And there were a few games where people left Berlin as Russia, even though they could take it, because if they took it, they would, of course, take out Germany. But giving the Allies 3 VPs is doesn't work.
Right.
Um, so so that's why you can say we went off the historical path for the sake of gameplay.
Yep. That's always what you
Gameplay
decide to do.
is yeah, gameplay is
Trumps.
always number one. Yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially at the end of the game when it's victory points. This was a really important change. So, okay, another little change that was made that I think is great for clarity is we have for the land zones the pin of the center of the land zone is the rondel. Now in version 4.2 we're putting a pin in a C zone. We just chose the C zone number to be that's where you trace when you're looking at terrain crossing. You trace from that C zone number, or when you're going from a C zone to another C zone, you're going across a narrow crossing. It makes it very clear where you're starting and finishing. I really like that you made this change because newer players were asking if they could be, say, there was a little arc of a narrow crossing and there was just a little sliver of C zone. Can I have my units be right here in this tiny little sliver? No, you're at this. You're in the C zone. You're right here. So it's one of those little changes that I think is going to be great for getting clarity about do I hit this terrain when I do an amphibious assault or so That's something that's new in 4.2. When you're scrambling from ports, another change is that only warships can scramble from ports. It used to be that naval transports, it said naval units, so people would suicide their naval units if you were doing an amphibious assault. Let's say someone's hitting Sydney and you've got a naval transport there, you might just scramble it out into the teeth of the amphibious assaulter so that it would die, and there wasn't a chance that it would be captured. So that's another little change that the community should know about. You aren't going to be able to do that in 4.2. A big change is Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Now their Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact only gives you the bonus income or the bonus tech if all of the Polish territories have been captured. Before, in earlier versions, Germany would take 3 land zones of Poland, but leave Lubelski and East Poland alone because they didn't want to trigger the D12, and the Russians wouldn't go in there because they couldn't collect the income. So the British would end up collecting for East Poland. It was a very unusual situation. Now there's incentive for Russia to go in there, and that makes Russia a little bit vulnerable in case Germany is going to decide to use their blitzkrieg against them while they've got all those units in Poland. What are your thoughts about changing Molotov-Ribbentrop?
It's also one of these things that we've been through and been over and over and over again, and it's very difficult to really get right, because it should be both the Russians and the Germans should be incentivized to do it. But if one gets too much out of it, the other one typically would not sign it. Yeah. And we did see, like you said, the scenarios where the British would keep Eastern Poland for several turns. And historically, Poland was the main course of the pact, so to speak. So in this version, we tweaked it a bit to be more historical. So yeah, it's and you can actually, if you look at the rules, you will find a lot of these small tweaks that happened due to some scenario where we wanted to address the balance a bit, or how most players play the game.
Mm-hmm.
And you will actually find that, or most people will find a lot of small changes that some of them will make sense from a simplification perspective or historical perspective, but some would perhaps not make sense because they have not come across this scenario in their own games.
Mm-hmm.
So you can say that for the past year, we have been catching a lot of imbalances and fixing stuff even before the community were made aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is also one of the benefits of reiterating
evolution.
Is that the engine keeps running better and better.
Yes.
Because we keep oiling it.
Mm-hmm.
So
One change that was made is about battlecruisers. Battlecruisers now get to add 2, just like subs, to their convoy raiding role. It used to only be 1, and they only get a default +6 in their escape from their ability to slip away. It used to be +8, but the defenders only get a +1 from radar in finding the battlecruisers, where they used to get a +6 in finding the battlecruisers. So what all this means is battlecruisers are a lot better at convoy raiding now, and they're a lot more slippery than they used to be. So you only get 1 round of combat to kill a battlecruiser on raider status, and defending battle cruisers on rating status get target selection. This is really amazing. I mean, there's a lot of changes to battle cruisers that make rating battle cruisers a lot better. I know the next time I play with a country that has a battle cruiser, I'm going to put it out on rating status and check that out. It seems very exciting. What are your thoughts about battle cruisers?
I think that people are more motivated to to set it up for rating, and that's what we want. It's also more simplified because now radar just is a what +1 across the board, and you can say that with the new supply path rules, people are even more incentivized to set it out to rate, because it's a real pain in the ass, and it can be quite difficult to get rid of. So your opponents have to
Command a
deal
lot
with
of
it.
ships.
Yeah, and that's actually what we want.
Mm-hmm.
So you can say that if you have a battle cruiser, if you look at the stats of rating, and you can argue that, well, it's not worth it. But that's only part of the equation. The other part is what you will make your opponents do in response to sending it out. So if your opponents need to commit aircraft, some surface ships, perhaps a carrier, to hunt it down, and you're in a remote part of the map, perhaps that's
Might be worth
something to might be
it.
worth
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And going back earlier to my discussion about submarines making them convoy rating more valuable, this is another way to help the Soviets, because if Germany sends its battle cruiser into the South Atlantic, that's less pressure in the Baltic and gives the Soviets a little bit more chance to compete for supremacy in the Baltic and be a little bit more well defended. So another subtle rule that by making that unit more valuable, maybe you're giving the Comintern some love that people don't see. So, okay, convoy rating is now reset at the end of each player's turn. So if I'm the Commonwealth, I take off all the convoy damage. At the end of my turn, I start fresh. And what this does is, before we would do it at the end of the turn, but you could kind of do double up in one turn of convoy rating. One particular country, like say Italy, could do damage after Great Britain went. Then the turn marker would be reset, and Germany could come in and raid the Mediterranean where Italy had been. And in that way, you could kind of double up with the old way. Now, with version 4.2, you can only get hit for your particular turn, and then it's reset. So I like
Exactly.
that change.
So it's what you said. We wanted to remove the doubles from happening.
Yeah, that was a good change. It's something that once you do that, you're like, yeah, that's totally the way it should work. Okay, fortifications reduce the effect of attrition attacks by 1. So let's say that the Germans build a fort in Paris. They've captured Paris. They build a fort there. The Allies land in Normandy, and they have a bunch of advanced artillery, and they could just attrit Paris down. But now it drops from hitting on a 2 to just dropping down to hitting on a 1. Any comments about that particular rule?
It makes sense from a realistic perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, you dug in. So, and you can argue from a gameplay perspective, once you have advanced artillery, moving a big pile of advanced artillery up next to your enemy and just attritioning down it's a good strategy. It's one of my favorite strategies.
And then now you have a way to counter Morton's favorite strategy.
Yeah.
So.
And then it's actually every time we have a good strategy, there should be a counter for it.
Yes.
And when the counter is obvious from a realistic perspective, then it's a no-brainer.
Right.
Um,
Similarly, fortifications reduce the effect of carpet bombing in cities. So you can't, a fortification that's not in a city, you can still carpet bomb at full effect, but it's my understanding that carpet bombing in cities, it gets reduced by one. So that's another thing about fortifications. Coastal defense ships can now bombard on a 1 or a 2. Another give a unit some love change was tank destroyers. They now cost only 4 instead of 5, but you can only build 2 per turn. I love that change because people weren't building tank destroyers, so they may want to build some tank destroyers now, but by capping them at 2, that fits within a lot of other units like colonial infantry or marines or other things that you can only build 2 of, 2 Panzer Grenadiers. You can only build 2 tank destroyers, so I love that change too. One other change is that USSR Lend-Lease, their wartime bonus income of Lend-Lease, is no longer optional for the Allies. They don't get to decide whether or not they're going to give the money to the Soviets. If it's free of enemy submarines and Kola is Soviet possessed and the Soviets are not at war with the Allies, they get the 2, and it's not a decision. So I think that's good because before, with Triumph of Capitalism, the Allies might not want the Soviets to get that Lend-Lease. Now it's not a decision. If they want to take that away, they're going to have to declare war in order to take that away from them. So I got a couple other things. That is that there's a max of 1 airbase per territory, which is great because some people were thinking about building multiple air bases in Paris to prevent it from being surrounded. Just build 10 air bases or whatever. Now you can only have 1 air base per territory. Strategic rail movement can now consist of a combination of railroads and rivers, so you can jump between railroads and rivers when you're doing strategic rail movement. I've got one more, but what I'd like to do is end this third part and then just do one final last fourth part, kind of get your end thoughts. I thought this was going to be our last one, but I'm too talkative. So let's wrap this one up and we'll do one more, my friend.